In 5 minutes.
Yes.
Good morning, Gristers. Our session will start in 2 minutes. Could you please take your seats? Good morning. We can hear the bell chiming, and it's time to start our session. This morning, we are in the science session, Climate Change, Variability and Applications of Sea and Sea Ice Surface Temperature. And I'm your chair, Chris Merchant. Faithfully recording everything that we say is Andrea Pisano. We begin with a keynote, which is by Anna, who's going to come and talk to us about marine heatwave drivers and impact use cases, challenges and opportunities. So please take the podium, Anna.
Hello. Yeah, you're hearing me fine. So, hello, good morning to all. My name is Ana. I come from Portugal, Lisbon, from Cola Plus Atlantic. Before I start, I have to say that I have probably the biggest imposter syndrome in the room because I don't come from the background most of you have. And I've been attending GREECE meetings and involved in the science team meeting group in the last couple of years. And I think the first meeting I attended was back in 2018, if my memory serves me. My background is actually spatial planning and urban planning and architecture. And I started being involved with this community because of the application side of things and what we can do with it. It all started with cities and land surface temperature, but then it spilled over to sea surface temperature because, of course, being someone who lives in Portugal and Lisbon, how could it not, right? So moving forward, I'm speaking a bit about marine heat wave drivers and the impact use cases. And as I was challenged and given the opportunity to speak as a keynote speaker, I wanted to provide you an overview of things that come to my mind in terms of challenges and opportunities from the user perspective. So putting myself in the shoes, not of the data producer, but for someone that doesn't know anything about SST processing and inference, but uses it on a daily basis. And to this effect, I'm going to show not only my own work, but also work from consortiums I work with, and I will duly acknowledge this throughout the presentation. So just as a brief introduction, Plus Atlantic is a research transfer institute. It's a private nonprofit association based in Portugal. And the idea for these collaborative laboratories is to transfer knowledge into the public or private sector. I would say that we work mostly with the public sector in terms of transfer of knowledge rather than industry. Still, we have, let's say, 3 lines of activities or research, applied research, aquaculture and fisheries support, blue economy consultancy, and then what we call our Atlantic Sense, which is geospatial information as a tool for public stakeholders and citizens. So, oops, too fast, too nervous. So looking into the marine heat wave aspect. So it's, I guess, common knowledge, and it was addressed probably in talks before, that we are seeing climate change, and climate change has been translated into warmer temperatures overall, but not only on land, also on the sea, and this drives impacts, as you are probably well familiar with. Some concern ecosystem services and marine life, others concern fueling storms, and also tipping points in the climate ecosystem. So marine heat waves, by definition, are abnormal sea water temperatures. Usually they are detected from the surface, but not only. They can be propagated and detected at depth, should we have observations to do that. One of the things that concerns me the most is the atmosphere interaction with the sea surface temperature and how this can lead to the accumulation of heat and the persistence of high pressure systems. I'm talking about this in a bit. So we do know that in, let's say, time ranges between 1 and 2 weeks or season ahead, we can see these kind of relationships, especially concerning climate modes. And this means that at the seasonal scale, even though we cannot predict certain events, we can have like a probabilistic outlook of whether we are looking into a warmer than average or cooler than average season and kind of anticipate expected ranges of impacts. The impacts themselves can range, as said earlier, from marine life, but also at other tipping points in ecosystems and the climate overall system, the Earth system. There are well-documented studies on algal blooms, coral bleaching, megafauna, and even seabirds and mammals. In terms of the definition, the original definition, which is proposed by OBDE, concerns climatology definition. So we calculate the climatology, the 90th percentile, using a reference period that can be the WMO 30 years period, and then we smooth it out. We see how many days, how many consecutive days trees pass the 90th percentile, and then the marine heat waves are actually the intensity from this deviation. The problem with working with marine heat waves, I would say 3 come to mind. So consolidation of the definitions, the understanding of the drivers, because only then we can recognize impacts. And this is of importance because it's a mathematical function, and the mathematical function is what triggers and flags marine heat waves from non-marine heat wave days and events. And if we start to measure impacts, it all starts with the way we detect it and how we understand the drivers that lead up to this detection. So throughout this talk, I will speak about 3 projects in particular. Plus Atlantic does not lead any of these projects, and I'm going to briefly, actually 4 projects, and I'm going to just briefly present them. So on the left-hand side, you see on the top Care Heat. This is the first project from the ones that I'm speaking about. It's funded by ESA, led by CNR ISMAR and Professor Rosalia Santolera, who is sitting here in the audience, and CNR ISMAR, together with ENEA, Mercator, Ifremer, CLS as well, and and then we have Me2, which is a follow-up ESA contract that builds upon this to multiple hazards and has the same leadership, similar consortium with some additional entities like Plymouth, University of Liège, just to state a few. Keeping to ESA projects at Exit, again with CNR ISMAR, but also with the Met Norway Institute. And this one is more focused in the drivers. And then on the right-hand side, we have OPSI for Clim, which is led by our hosts here, the MI, and it's about the essential ocean variables. So on the consolidation of definitions, this is just a simple plot that is similar to many that you have seen concerning the trends. In this case, it's the trends in marine heat waves in number using the original definition, and you can see how the significant increase spreads throughout the North Atlantic, which is the area of interest I work with, being a citizen in Portugal, so baited by the Atlantic. If we look at the maximum intensity, the picture is less contrasting, so the significance of the trends is a bit smaller. Still, we do see positive signs, and there's a complete absence of negative trends. And then if we go to the duration, it's the same picture. Why is this relevant? This is not a breakthrough science. This is just a pretty picture showing what we all know. But what's breaking barriers, it's the work that has been conducted by Care Heat. And this is, I'm highlighting actually a study that also has involved Andrea Pisano that looks into this. So this was the first project that, as far as I know, that actually had a look into marine heat wave detection to showcase how trends can actually be taken out of the time series. Also the single spectral analysis to take out the climate modes. And if this first study is focused on the Mediterranean Sea to show how if we take the sea surface temperature long-term trends from the time series, we cease to have significant positive trends, which means that the underlying signal of marine heat wave trends comes actually from the climatology shift in the Mediterranean Sea. If you have any questions, I suggest you talk to the CNR ISMAR team here that is leading this study. But what's important to mention, I think, for you all is that if you are interested in these topics, one of the major outputs of this consortium was to produce 2 marine heat wave atlases. It uses as a CCISST. It uses a baseline climatology according to WMO from 91 to 2000, and 2 atlases has been produced. So there is one CNR marine heat wave atlas that actually uses the update definition spoke about before. So it has the underlying sea surface temperature trend, and then you have a more sophisticated one that was post-processed or pre-processed, if you prefer, to take out the long-term variability, so the nonlinear trends, but also single spectral analysis to take out the underlying signal of certain climate modes like El Nino from the time series. So with this comparison, you actually get the detrended compared with the non-detrended time series to see how the climate system is moving forward, what comes from the sea surface temperature increase, from what's actually the variability contemplating the sea surface trend a long time. And this is very useful because when we move into another studies, and this is now coming from the OPSI for CLIM led by the MI, and I said already like 3 times before that we are working on the Atlantic. So if I want to understand the relationship with North Atlantic oscillation, which is the prevailing driver here, I need to recognize if the relationship between the air and the sea surface temperature and the exchanges of heat are actually monotonic in nature. So if they are persistent along the range of temperatures and the range of atmospheric parameters, or if they change and they vary according to sea surface temperature changes. So as the output of this project, we also analyzed trends. Here we focused on the provinces just to have a first approximation of clusters of relationships between sea surface temperature and marine heat waves, to show that there is underlying differences. For example, mid-latitudes tend to have larger marine heat wave intensities and frequencies when we have a positive North Atlantic oscillation, and unlike this, in polar subarctic regions is the other way around. And this is very relevant to the next step, which is to understand drivers. So my main concern from starting with work with this was actually heat waves on land in the European continent and the Iberian Peninsula in particular, and how the jet stream position and the high pressure system on the Azores Island actually determines this. And what I saw when I was starting to compare sea surface temperatures with land surface temperatures is that actually if we cluster sea surface temperatures and marine heat waves along these two climate modes, we get this. So in positive North Atlantic oscillation, we have greater intensity and frequency and duration, but mostly frequency and duration in the mid-latitude, which is the region of interest for myself, I mean, for the Plus Atlantic work. And then if you look at the negative phase, you get the other way around. So the maximum duration and intensities are clustered near the equator and in the northern most latitudes. So this means that there is actually a relationship, or at least it suggests there is a relationship in probabilistic terms. So we went to look ahead to specific events. This all started with the 2018 event because it was a warm summer season in Europe. And for the first time when I was starting to work with SST, I noticed that there was like a coincidence in terms of the prevailing marine heat wave that we see in the mid-latitudes and how it kind of suggested to lead to a warmer than average summer season and dry. Here you see composite maps of certain parameters. Most of them come from the atmosphere, and you can see the patch of the marine heat wave on the left top map. And you can see the coincidence between the high pressure centers on the Azores Island and how related to this you have a gain from heat fluxes from the atmosphere and also stable conditions in terms of wind speed, which is on the bottom middle plot. So the blue is the lower wind speed velocities and also more stable conditions. This is actually agreeing with the literature. So we have a high pressure system, we have increased heat gains to the sea surface, and the marine heat wave develops. So it's like a book standard example. If we look at the correlations in time, what we see is the positive significant correlation, for example, with geopotential height at 500 hectopascals, the anomaly, so without any seasonal curve in it. And if we look at the net solar radiation, we see the same. So this is again reinforcing that this marine heat wave likely was attributable to an excess heat gain from the atmosphere in shorter time ranges. And if we look at the Spearman correlation with wind speed, of course, it's the reverse picture because, again, wind speed is a function also of these stable atmospheric conditions. So then let's look again at a by book example of a negative North Atlantic oscillation, and we see the reverse picture. So marine heat wave intensity clusters outside of the region of the previous one. It's actually like a negative picture of the former one. And you can see that in terms of sea level pressure anomaly, we actually have a negative anomaly in that place. And likewise, we have the excess wind speed in that same place. So this again reinforces that there is a very, very strong connection between the atmosphere and these parameters and their patterns and how they trigger or relate at least with the marine heat wave onset and persistence in the North Atlantic. Again, if we look at the correlations, we see the same signals, but in different positions. This is the geopotential height, net solar radiation, and again, wind speed. Now, this is not enough if we want to study the relationships because from previous work on heat waves on land, there is a need to kind of rank and detect heat waves not only as a temporal and bipixel phenomena, but as a complete, let's say, special entity. So to this, we need to filter out the bipixel detection, to cluster it into patches, treat it as an image processing unit. And to this effect, we are using actually computer vision and these kinds of algorithms to post-process the bipixel marine heat waves into these patches that you see in the below plot. This does not mean that the other pixels are not flagged as marine heat waves. It just means that it allows us to compute cumulative statistics over certain events, because this is a labeling events exercise. And this is the way by which we can then relate to the atmospheric patterns, because we need to start somewhere, and pixel-wise it's very difficult to identify where a marine heat wave starts and ends, spatially speaking. So this is an example of how the algorithms work. So it's a clustering algorithm. We are trying several algorithms, actually. There is a challenge, which is to define the minimum and the maximum area that we allow the algorithm to filter out in terms of pixels. And this is by trial and error. We have run several experiments, and we are still developing this. So we don't have like a last, or let's say, finally approved algorithm to present to the community, but we are working actively on this as we speak. So I already spoke about the relationship with the North Atlantic Oscillation, and just wanted to show again a 2000 event and how it relates with the atmospheric pressure. So in red and blue, you see respectively the high pressure and low pressure systems dancing around during a negative North Atlantic Oscillation period. And again, you see the cumulative or the accumulation of marine heat wave excess in the northernmost latitudes, which is the yellowish orange pixels highlighted where you see some dots. The dots are like the section, let's call it a section, that you see on the lower part, and you can see the dance between the high and low pressure systems like shifting in time quite fast. Now, this is an example of the time series, and the blue is the cyclone passing by, the red is the anticyclone, and the green is all that remains. And you can see that it's kind of random. Now, if you look again to the 2018 marine heat wave development, and if you look below, you can see that the high pressure system is more stable. It is kind of stuck there. The marine heat wave starts to develop in this mid-latitude region. And if you look at the section below, which is at a different latitude, you can see that most of the time frames and most of the frames of the animation actually have a high pressure system passing by, and hence the accumulation of heat and the development of the marine heat wave. And again, this all started because when I look at this picture, I knew from previous example that later on we see a development of an atmospheric heat wave on the Iberian Peninsula going through Europe. So the hypothesis here is that they are interconnected. Again, if we see at the time series of the sections, you clearly see much more red than you saw before, and this is the anticyclone and the high pressure systems. So in EXIT, and again, another project led by Met Norway with our involvement CNR ISMAR as well, funded by ESA, we are looking at the correlations between these aspects. So now it's no longer an exercise of coincidence in space, like the plots you saw before. It's relationship in space and time. So what you see from these plots is actually the correlation in red between what is the average time series of marine heat waves and sea surface temperature anomaly in the gray area along the Azores Island, and how it relates to the excess factor, which is a heat wave indicator on land. And you can see that there is practically an absence of negative correlations, except from Scandinavia in the north. And in most locations, you see a positive correlation, which leads us to believe, again, with statistical support, that there is a strong, meaningful relationship between what happens in the North Atlantic and how is the seasonal outlook of the atmospheric temperatures and the excess heat anomalies on land. If we look at droughts, because we are also looking at droughts, we see the same coincidence. So here a negative correlation that means that we have absence of rain. And even though the spatial patterns are different, the relationship is again meaningfully significant in most locations that are kind of closer to the Atlantic. Still, we see differences across the seasons, which means that the relationship probably is different along the seasons. So we are putting everything together to make this available to the community. So if everything goes well, by next year, sorry, not week, definitely, you will have a data set publicly available encompassing especially all of these three excesses, so marine heat waves, and here we are using actually the original definition, but also comparing with care heat results. Then you will have SPEI, which is a drought indicator, and then you will have atmospheric heat waves all together in a single NetCDF, or if it doesn't fit there, because we are not sure it will, you can have NetCDFs that are ready to be merged together. So this is the idea, is to prove the relationship, but also offer the compiled data set harmonized into a single grid so that you can explore it further and help us out in finding how these things relate with each other. And this is another mosaic showing the same as before, but in a single image and file. But this is just for the 2018 relationship. And I mentioned before the onset of a dry summer season. So if you look at the brownish colors, this means there is a drought. And if you look at the reddish colors on land, this is the actually atmospheric heat wave that develops during this summer season. And you see it passing by while the marine heat wave persists in the Mediterranean, mid-latitude Atlantic, and also in some time frames in the Northern Sea and Baltic Sea. So finally, I'm not sure how much I have in time. How am I? I'm fine? Oh. I was so speeding up because I was afraid not being able to fulfill. So now I will slow down and you just tell me if I'm going too slow now. So impacts. I started in the beginning to talk that I came to this community because I wanted to study impacts. Impacts on the climate system. Actually, this was the trigger for everything. But later on, I got the opportunity to be involved on CareHit and work alongside INEA on the recognition of impacts. Here we had two studies, one about aquaculture impact assessment with farmers that we work with in the Atlantic. And on the INEA side, I have strong connections with Isole Pelagie. So they are working with marine protected areas and actually species that go beyond marine species in the sense of being, fish. So marine birds and turtles, for example. In both cases, we are using data-driven methods, so statistical relationships between what is the marine heat wave atlas as a predictor and what is the outcome in terms of the bio data that we have available. I'm going to briefly speak about the aquaculture impact assessment, but feel free also to approach INEA and to ask about the marine protected area. Salvatore Marullo is also here in the audience, I'm guessing, so he can a bit elaborate on that if you have curiosity. One of the things that we wanted to do before we proceed to the statistical analysis is to collect user stories. User stories are usually done by software developers, and they are very simple sentences depicting the who, the what, and the why. And the idea was to go to these aquaculture farmers and marine protected areas, ask them why they want sea surface temperature, why they want the CareHit marine heat wave atlases for, and how can they use it. I mean, not only the why, but the how. So just to provide an example, we have here 3 user stories, and also we have a currently open survey that we promoted to the community so that people could respond in a more elaborate manner of how these CareHit results can be of use. So the who, for example, a nearshore seaweed aquaculture farmer in Norway, a real one, so this is not bogus, it's a real person saying this, wants to estimate biomass growth because they have a problem with biofouling. And from the start of biofouling in the blades of kelp, the kelp no longer has food grade quality. So they lose a lot of money. So this is what they want to detect. So they are interested in sea surface temperature and marine heat waves because they want actually to anticipate the growth of this biofouling to make sure that they can collect the kelp sooner rather than later and keep it as something that is profitable. On the other side, a bivalve aquaculture farm in Rio Formosa in Portugal wants to evaluate the economic impact of marine heat waves on the energy costs for the temperature regulation of the depuration system. So they are farming oysters. And one of the challenges that they have is that they spend a lot of energy for the depuration, and marine heat waves are a big problem because they need to cool down the water a lot. So for them, it's important marine heat waves, not because it directly impacts, because it's a controlled system, the depuration part, but because of the energy. A third example, as a nearshore sea bream aquaculture farmer, and this is actually our user from the results I'm going to show next, wants to predict fish growth in the cycle duration. So I was expecting them to say they wanted to predict mortality or fish growth in 1 month. No, they want to predict the full cycle because the cycle of sea bream does not conform with the seasonal cycle. So it's 1.5 years. And this means that 1 year and a half, it decouples from the seasonal cycle, and sometimes they have the juveniles starting in, say, the spring, and sometimes it's like 1 year and a half later, so in September, October, in autumn. So because for them this is a problem, they want actually to anticipate and recognize why certain lots grow faster than others. So we studied sea bream and kelp, sea bream in Madeira Island, so in mid-latitudes, and kelp actually in Norway, so there is something wrong here in the slide. Apologies for that. It's actually in Frøya in Norway. And this is also not good. So this means that there was some kind of mishap in terms of the import of PowerPoint. So you have to trust on me. So what we saw is that actually, even though the sea bream stakeholders were expecting a positive influence of marine heat waves, because they say when temperatures are warmer in Madeira, the sea bream grows faster. Statistically, what we found was the other way around. Indeed, sea surface and temperatures, when they are greater, the fish grows faster, but marine heat waves are a deviation from the climatology in the 90th percentile, which means that sea surface temperatures are abnormally warm, but it can happen in winter. So it's not a relationship between the seasonal cycle, because that's what they are pointing at, but the anomaly of the deviation. And when we showed them the results, their feedback was that, okay, so this is maybe the reason why we are seeing so many diseases leading to autumn and winter. So when they have warmer than average temperatures, they're leading to winter. They see a culprit of bacteria, and they suspect that this may be related to abnormalist temperatures during the cold season instead of the warm one. So this is just like an anecdote to say that these users don't know what a marine heat wave is. They actually need us to explain to them, because for them, a marine heat wave is absolute terms, so very warm temperature from what they are used to. And that's not what the marine heat wave is. So we needed to explain to them. And only when we explained to them, still they were a bit puzzled with the plots, which you are not seeing, but it shows the relationship. And this is the, let's say, explanation they came to us with. I'm not sure if it's true, because there are a lot of confounding factors. The provenance of the juveniles, the food stock they use, because they are still experimenting. It's a young production, but still the relationship was statistically significant and decreasing one. Yeah, 2 minutes. I'm just concluding. This is, I don't know if this is my last slide. Yeah, but it's almost. So we also exercise with using SST for prediction in the short term. And here you can see how using SST products actually, and I think this might be interesting for you, decreases the thermal growth coefficient, which is the one they use the most, sharply. So one of the things I would like to point out is that food stock providers usually provide the software for fish growth estimate, but this uses deterministic models like the thermal growth coefficient, but uses climatology for people to estimate. It doesn't go to forecast. It doesn't use near real-time data. So one of the use cases we can actually explore is to talk with these feedstock providers and see how can they improve their software to actually have sea surface temperatures products embedded. And finally, well, this is my last slide. Our next step is to integrate marine heat wave detection on our platform. Here we are using the standard of the algorithm publicly available and implementing it on CMAMS data coming from the service, so the public data. And our idea is to keep working with these stakeholders and actually offer them a channel by which they can retrieve this data, like in Excel format, CSV format, like a time series, because one of the major findings we had, not findings, but learnings, is that they find the maps and the pictures very amazing, but what they actually want is a CSV to put in Excel. So if we offer them like a on-the-fly GIS system by which they can pick a point and retrieve the CSV, that's what they want. The platform is more than this. It's not only for marine heat waves, it's also for heat waves inland and other impacts. And actually, that's just what we are trying to do. A cool platform on which you can pick a point and retrieve the CSV time series. And yeah, my last slide. And just to show my appreciation to my colleagues and my amazing team in Portugal, and you are welcome to visit us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. we'll take questions for all the speakers after 3 talks. So we're going to move straight on to the second talk of the morning, which is Pallavi. And Pallavi is talking about high resolution mapping of thermal stress and marine heat waves on the Australian coasts using level 3 SSTs. So thank you, Anna. That was a fantastic introduction to the session. And I'm sure people will have questions in a minute.
Yeah. So I'm Pallavi Govekar from Bureau of Meteorology, and I will be talking about our level 3 supercollited sea surface temperature product and how we are using it to monitor heat stress and marine heat wave in the Australian region. So at the Bureau, we have operational level 3 supercollited L3S SST product that is made with composition of polar orbiters. So at the moment, SOMI, MPP, NOAA 20, METOP B, and METOP C going together. And then with University of Reading, recently we developed Himawari 8 and 9 SST products. And with the accuracy of Himawari with our products, we are also trying to put Himawari together with polar orbiters and make new level 3 product that is geopolar multi-sensor. So here left hand side is the only polar orbiter together for one night, and the right hand side is the addition of Himawari to that. So with the addition of Himawari 8, we on average we get more 20% of the data coverage. So having that better data coverage, now from the Bureau, we run a RIP-TEMP next-gen service. We call it as a RIP-TEMP since 2012. And last year, we stopped it at Bureau. For the Great Barrier Reef region, we were producing heat risk monitoring matrices. So these tools are now are handed to AODN. So AODN is Australian Ocean Data Network run by IMOS, and they are running that system. But there are known issues with this system, and as a phase 2, we are trying to improve those products. And I'm going to talk about those products really today here. So first thing is the data coverage. With the infrared channels that we are using, where there is a cloud, we do have gap. And for making any sensible tools, we need gap-free data. And then all these products are 2-kilometer resolution. So with the geopolar multi-sensor, again, that is the addition of Himawari with polar orbiters, we are using that SST. We are subtracting SES bias before using that SST, and also we are converting it to a subskin SST, so that is 20 centimeter down, because our climatology that we are going to use is calculated at Boyd's level. The STARS climatology that was calculated with CSRO using 25 years of AVHRR only L3S data for 1992 to 2016. Now, why only up to 2016 is before developing these tools, we gathered feedback from user community around Australia, and the main a concern from the people we got is after 2016, we got that really booming SST that yesterday Chris and William were mentioning. So we were told not to include any data after 2016 in our climatology to make these tools. And that's why we are using this climatology that is calculated from 1992 to 2016 in the region. The mosaic technique to fill up the gaps. So what we did is If there is no data for today, we check for yesterday. And if it is not yesterday, day before yesterday. So that way we went 14 days back to fill up the data. And in this picture, the left-hand side is the SST for 1 day, and right-hand picture, how we fill up those gaps going back. The upper panels are SST and the lower panel are SST anomaly. So SST anomaly is just the SST minus climatology. Then degree heating day and degree heating day count. So degree heating day is the accumulation of positive anomalies over certain period. So I will come to that certain period in a minute. But then here is what we get. So left-hand side is again what we are getting using 1 day SST, and the right-hand side again is from the mosaic product that is gap filled. So we are interpreting these tools as a best and worst condition. So the 1 day condition is what we get the best answers, and the right hand side is the worst. So as you see, degree heating day are overestimated at some places with that gap filling. We are interpreting it as a sort of best and worst condition. Degree heating day count is the number of days that contributed to the calculation of degree heating days. And then mean positive summer anomaly is sort of normalization, because we are looking at the 1 day and 14 day things. So it's basically degree heating day divided by degree heating day count. Now, how to decide what period to accumulate those positive anomalies for calculation of degree heating dates. So these colors are showing months of maximum SST using daily mean temperature from STARS climatology. And from this, we are using 1st of November to 30th of April period to accumulate those positive anomalies for the Australian coast. So with the RIP to our old system, we used 1st of December to 30th of March, but that was only for GBR. So now we are extending for all Australian coast, so we are changing that period from 1st November to 30th of April. Now, as Anna showed before, half day definition for the marine heatwave category. So in 2016, they came up with the definition that if our SST is exceeding threshold, and that is normally 90th percentile of the long-term climatology, is exceeded for at least 5-day period. Then we call it as a marine heatwave. And in 2018, same group came up with categorization of the marine heatwave. So we look at the 90th percentile and the mean climatology difference, and then the multiples of that difference. If it is twice, then it is in category 2, category 3, and that sort of thing. So we are using this definition in our condition. For that long-term climatology, we are using 50th percentile. So for categorization, we consider that difference between 90th percentile and 50th percentile of the STARS climatology non-seasonal. This is what we get from that definition. So again, left-hand side is from 1 day SST, and the right-hand side from 14 days. So, and this is just 4th of May is one random day. This May, gray color there is where there is no data available. White color is no marine heat wave conditions, and then from yellow to red is ranging from moderate to extreme marine heat wave conditions. So this year particularly, it was really warm for Australia, especially the western part of Australia was boiling basically this year. We had northwest shelf, so some of the region had first time recorded coral bleaching this year. In Ningaloo Reef, last time in 2011, we had some of the, can I use, oh, sorry. how to point it. Now, okay, whatever. The western, I want to show the western coast actually. So in the Ningaluri this year again there is a massive coral bleaching, and we are still assessing that one. In Great Australian Bight, so that is the southern part of Australian coast, we do have lots of fish killing event and algae blooms. In northern Great Barrier Reef region, again we had some bleaching and marine heatwave conditions. Okay. So with the 14 days period, we are bit overestimating the marine heatwave conditions, but then that is what we can do with our recent gap filling thing. Now, here are two case studies. So in 2016, it was the El Nino year, and we had massive coral bleaching in GBR region. And in 2017, again with the warm temperature, there were big concerns of further bleaching. But then in March, end week of March, Cyclone Debbie arrived, and then with that significant cooling associated with the cyclone, the coral bleaching was arrested. So I'm just checking with our tools how it looked. So the left-hand side is shown the mosaic period SST anomaly, and then the right-hand side is showing the number of days we had to go back for each pixel to fill up that gap. And then the upper panel is from the our operational multi-sensor, so that is with only polar orbiters, and the lower panel is with the addition of Himawari. So as we see there, the old system needed data from like even after 14 days, there were some gaps in the data. We needed that historical data significantly, whereas in the new system, still there are some places where we have to go 6 to 8 days back, and definitely where you see that blue thing to the southern side, it's a warm positive anomaly, and that's not right. The whole region should have the cooling effect. And then if you see the right-hand side panel, that data is the historical data. It's we have to go back 6 to 8 days to fill that those pixels. So definitely we need improvement over our gap filling method. We wanted to try some methods, including ML, but with the resource conference this year, we couldn't do that. So this is the one thing we want to improve. The other case study is about the South Australian coast. So this March, between March and May, there was a mysterious brown foam covered South Australia's beaches. It killed precious sea life, and people who were on the beach that time complained about flu-like symptoms, red eyes, and that sort of things. And government actually had to close some beaches for the public access. So I just looked at the area with these tools. So these are a snapshot from 1st February to 15th of April. So in the region, again, we are looking at the southern coast of Australia. And yeah, there were moderate to strong marine at some point reaching to severe marine heatwave conditions. So throughout, yes, it was warm. And then if we zoom over only on that Adelaide region, so here I am just looking at a couple of previous years compared to this year. So the first column is showing 23, second is 24, and then the third is 25. And this is the degree hitting day, so accumulation on last day of the season, the 30th of April. And the first row is with using 1-day SST, and then the second is the 14-day, the mosaic product, and the last one is how the degree heating days was accumulated over the period from 1st of November to 30th of April. So compared to the last 2 years, this year was exceptional. We had degree heating day recorded numbers. And if you see how they accumulate, so the previous years, there was a time when it stabilized a bit and then went up a bit, but then this year it didn't stabilize at all. It just goes boom, 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 up, up, up. So this is this kind of analysis we are doing, and we want to look at marine heatwave category and the degree heating relationship, but that is long-term scale versus short-term scale, and we still need to analyze that. And this is my last thing. So it's just showing the comparison between level 4, if you were using the level 4 product and the level 3 product. So the left-hand side is the marine heatwave tracker that use DUA SST 25 kilometer product, and then the lower panel is Coral Reef Watch. It is a 5 kilometer geopolar blend SST product, and then the climatology is from 1985 to 1990. And the right-hand side is our product with the level 3. So with the level 3, the feature resolution you get that you don't really get with the level 4.
Time to wrap up, Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I suggest you leave the conclusions on for us to read as we change our speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Another very interesting and pertinent talk with some interesting impacts there. The third speaker, it's the wrong sheet. Claudia, yes, that was her title. The third speaker is Claudia, and the topic is unveiling the relationship between Mediterranean tropical-like cyclones and rising sea surface temperatures. There we go. Thank you, Claudia.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, thank you, Chris. So, sorry about that. So, hi everyone. I'm Claudia Fanelli. I'm going to present today the relationship, well, some results on the relationship between Mediterranean tropical-like cyclones and rising sea surface temperature. This work has been developed and published in collaboration with Andrea Pisano at CNR with me, and with 2 other colleagues at the Institute of Atmospheric Climate Sciences at the CNR as well. Just to give you a brief introduction of what Medicanes is, the name came from Mediterranean hurricanes, because they are very similar to tropical-like cyclones, to the tropical cyclones. They are mesoscale low-pressure systems with the deep warm core, asymmetrical shape, weak wind shear, and the classic cloud free high in the middle. So the mechanism that triggered the development is not unique. Some of them, actually a minority, developed due to a baroclinic instability, which is actually the main mechanism of the development of extratropical cyclones, so cold air masses coming from the polar region and warm masses coming from the tropics encounter on the subtropics, and they can cause the extratropical cyclones. But most of them, they developed due to diabatic processes, so the transfer of the energy from the sea to the atmosphere. And this is the main mechanism of the development of the tropical cyclones, but also during all the phases, also for the mature phase, okay? So medicanes develop over the sea and rapidly decay after landfall, but even if they have a lot of similarities with tropical cyclones, we have a very big difference, which is the average values of the sea surface temperature between tropics and the Mediterranean Sea. So we were interested to find out more about the relationship between these two events. So we know that for the genesis of tropical cyclones, there is a threshold of 26.5 degrees to trigger the genesis. But we also know that this threshold is not valid for the subtropics. And we know that it is not always satisfied in the Mediterranean Sea during the period which is favorable to their development. So we were interested in understand which is the relationship between the sea surface temperature and the genesis of the medicanes, okay, in the Mediterranean Sea. Surprisingly, there is a lack of this kind of studies in the literature because most of the papers published so far, they use model data. There is just one work from Cavicchia and co-workers who is using actual observational data, but at a lower resolution. So we thought to understand a little bit more about that. We have chosen the 15 most important medicanes in 42 years from 1982 to 2023. Their tracks have been identified by the method developed by Flaunas and co-workers in 2023, which use a combination of local maxima of relative vorticity, the local minima of geopotential height, or the minima of the mean sea level pressure from ERA 5. And for the sea surface temperature, we have used the Mediterranean Sea high-resolution L4 reprocessed SST product for the Copernicus Marine Service, which is available from the 1982 to present at approximately 5 kilometer resolution, and which is also, as you know, probably know, homemade at CNR. And this is a very good product to climate applications. It's a very, we have a very long period and it is very stable. We have chosen two specific times to study these events. The first one is the early stage, which we call T1, which is the time and the position of the medicanes when the track starts. And a second time, T2, which is the mature phase, which is identified as the minima of the mean sea level pressure. So the time and the position of the medicanes when we have this minima. Okay, as you can see, I hope the colors, you can see the colors quite well. Most of we have medicanes in the whole basin, but there is a major concentration in the Ionian Sea. We have just one medicanes originating over the Atlantic Sea, and you will see that it will be the only one with a different behavior. And from the list of the months, I don't know if we have, anyway, we can say that most of the events occurred in the months of September, October, and November, with just 4 exceptions, which occurred in January or December. Yeah, so state of the art mainly says that we need a strong positive anomaly to trigger the vertical gradient need to develop a medicane, but we thought that if we are talking about the Mediterranean Sea, which is very sensitive to climate change and climate variability, and also is experiencing a warming rate of about 0.4 degree per decade, which is not even in a spatial term. So the eastern part is warming at a faster rate with respect to the western part. So if we want to compare events over a long time period and which are developing in different points of the Mediterranean, it's very important to take into account the trend and remove it to mitigate the effect of this warming trend. So you can see here, just below the map, the points indicate the SST value below the medicanes at T1, so at the early stage, compared to the line is the monthly average, the SST monthly average in the basin. And maybe from the dots is not very clear, but the bar plots are helping us to understand the difference between the value, the SST value at T1 of each medicanes and the monthly average value. So you can see that for all the medicanes except one, we have an above average SST value with respect to the basin. The exception is Ilona, which is the one originating in the Atlantic Sea. So as I was saying, we decided not to study the SST anomaly because we have to be very careful to say that there is always a positive SST anomaly because this is due to the climate change. We are in an eternal positive anomaly, but we will consider the trended SST anomaly. We cannot say that there is a very clear pattern, but you will see that actually we have a majority of negative detrended SST anomaly. So here you can say that even if the medicanes originated mainly in the Ionian Sea, along their life cycle, they actually spread all over the Mediterranean. And along their path, the second map is the detrended SST anomaly along their path. And they actually, we can find a predominantly negative detrended SST anomaly with a few exceptions, which are the winter cases, so December and January. And we think that given that those are the coldest months, an above average SST is needed to generate the vertical temperature gradient, which is strong enough to trigger the intense convection for the medicanes. Here you can see maybe a little bit better. The spatial map is the trended SST anomaly at T1 for each medicane, and overimposed is the track of the medicane. So we have the map is at T1, but the track is moving in time, of course. You can see that actually at T1 we have a predominance of negative detrended SSTA in the triggering phase, with the exception of the winter cases, which you can see now they are those four highlighted in green. And also, as you can see from the table, that the mean of the trended SST anomaly at the beginning of the medicanes, at the starting of the medicanes, is minus 0.79. So we have a clarity majority of negative detrended SSTA. Okay, thank you. There is something that it is true, is that the medicanes leave a cold anomaly after their passage. This is happening for all the events that we have considered. If you are looking at the maps of the SST difference from 5 days before to 5 days after the mature phase of the medicanes, you can see in green the cooling effect of the passage of the medicanes. The rest of the basin has can have different behavior, but you can see very clear that where the medicane pass, it will have a cold anomaly after their passages. So especially for some autumn cases, which are Zorbas, Janos, and Daniel, you can see very clearly, like below the passage, how the temperature has decreased. And those are actually the most intense medicanes, so the ones that drain more energy from the sea to the atmosphere, and the ones that they have caused most damage after their passages. So just to sum up, we have seen how the majority of the medicanes generate in the Ionian Sea, but they actually spread all over the Mediterranean Sea, and they are most frequent in September, October, and November. They definitely leave cold anomaly after their passage, so a general cooling is present for each medicanes. But we cannot say, we have to be very careful when we say that a positive anomaly is needed to generate these events, because if we consider the detrended climatology, as I was saying, this is not true. It's actually true the opposite. But the absolute value is actually more important, have a more marked role, because as we've seen, in all of the cases except Ilona, we have an above average SST value with respect to the monthly the monthly average of the basin. So if you're interested to know something a little bit more about this, we have published this in Geophysical Research Letters, and I'm happy to answer all of your questions now. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. Excellent. So we now have 10 minutes for questions for all three of the speakers. And I suggest we start off by picking up any questions for Anna, who gave the keynote at the beginning. And just to remind you, Anna told us about marine heat waves and discussed the issue that the definition makes an important change to how you interpret them. We saw a clustering of events and some very nice work on the impacts of them. So, first question, William. And yes, please come to the podium to answer. Yeah.
I've got, I guess, two comments that you may like to reply to almost, as opposed to a question. First one is related to the fish example that you gave, where they were looking at temperature related to their growth rates, and you mentioned that they were also having issues with the disease, and that you noticed that the warm anomalies during the winter were affecting that. So my comment is, I think you need to split those two questions up and look at them separately, and don't just take anomalies that you've already defined and apply them to that question, but rather understand the question first and then derive the anomalies to suit the question. So we looked at disease in corals before, and the story there for most diseases, not all diseases, is that the pathogens, generally speaking, are trimmed down during the winter time. So cold water tends to knock their population around. So it's all about the delivery of or the amount of pathogens you have leading into the summer heat stress period. And then, so cold winters, less pathogens, warm winters, more pathogens, and therefore they can multiply and end up being really bad in the summer. And then of course, the heat stress story is different again for the growth of the fish.
Joanna, would you like to comment on this spontaneous presentation?
No, I just like to appreciate your comment. Just for the sake of clarity, we did not establish any relationship with the disease because we don't actually have that data. Our analysis was as simple as it gets: marine heat waves intensities, marine heat waves frequencies versus growth rates, like bivariate analysis. It's very simple. Also SST anomaly and SST in absolute terms. The disease part came from them. It's their feedback. So when they saw the results and they found them surprising, they said, oh, maybe it's their hypothesis. And we actually asked for the data, but they did not give us. The only thing I can say is that their feedback, and again, I've never seen the data, so I don't know if it's true. Their feedback, oral feedback, is that their bacteria problem is only during the autumn leading to winter.
So I had a quick, before it goes, I think, Peter, you still want a question? No, you're not allowed another one, William, sorry. Peter, do you still have a question? No, okay. I was wondering about, it's very nice to have this strong interaction with the users, practically finding the users and having these conversations. Tell us about how much work and how you went about
It's
that.
a mess.
Right.
Okay. It's mess. It's a mess. So, for example, the survey for Care Heat, we send out the surveys throughout Europe. We established connections with associations, with farmers, and we had less than 10 responses because they do not engage. They don't recognize the value enough to put the effort into replying. And the other thing is that this is another of the results from CareHit that we are going to put in the roadmap, the scientific roadmap on the impact subsection, is that there is not enough in situ biological data availability, and it would actually be very nice if, like, for example, like they do in Brazil, because I know Brazilians working in the oil industry, they have to some kind monitor the ocean and provide some freely available data as return currency to the government, let's say. So it would be cool if some governments would implement such a system in aquaculture farmers. I understand it's their industry secrecy not to share all the data, but at least some parts, anonymized data would be helpful. For example, the growth rates per month, I mean.
Yeah. Well, that's a bit disheartening, but well done on getting some
sorry,
useful
but
responses in the first
couldn't
yeah.
put it golden because it's not.
No, it is hard work. I thought that. Thank you. Do we have any questions for Pallavi, who was the second speaker, talking about degree heating days around Australia? I thought William might have a question on that one. Okay, and we have one online. I'll come to you in a second, Helen.
I'll be quick.
Good.
Just a comment. Don't be surprised if your degree heating days don't work over on Ningaloo Reef, because the satellites don't actually see the temperatures that the reef sits in. And this is because you're actually mostly sitting on the Lewin Current. The Lewin Current is coming from a very warm region to the south. The actual temperatures on Ningaloo Reef occur when the Lewin Current passes Ningaloo Reef and then forms eddies which cause upwelling, and then that's then blown back up the coast as a very thin.
You're stretching the definition of reef, William.
Sorry. So in other words, the corals are in a very different regime to what the satellites measure. It's a resolution problem.
Yeah, but then with the Western Australia, basically, we don't have those aerial surveys or in situ data available that we might have in Great Barrier Reef region. So from the feedbacks we got from the user community in Western Australia, is satellite data is super important for them because it's something better than that. Yeah.
We also have a question from Helen online. Helen, do you want to speak?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
We can, Helen. Right. Please put your questions, Pallavi.
Okay, yes. Great talk. It's wonderful to see the progress, Pallavi. I wanted to know if your geopolar multi-sensor L3S metrics, the marine heatwave categories, etc., are now available in delayed mode on the NCI computer thread server. That was my first question. My second question was, has anybody looked at these new metrics outside of the Bureau, like CSIRO or AIMS, scientists who might give feedback to you about their kind of efficacy? Thank you.
Yeah, so the first question, yes, data is available on National Computing Infrastructure, NCI, on thread server, and up to end of 22, it's also available with IMOS, Australian Ocean Data Network, thread server. Second question, who is using the data at the moment is, yes, Bureau people, and then bigger IMOS community have started looking at it. Some of the AIMS people are looking at it as an experimental product, of course. There is thing called event-based sampling. So for the glider missions, they look at interesting things happening around the Australian coast, and they deploy gliders if there is anything interesting. So for that matter, they are using these tools, find interesting stuff happening.
Oh, good. Later, I'd like to hear your feedback of what's happened, whether they've found it of use. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you. And let's move on to the final talk. Thank you, Pallavi. Claudia was talking about medicanes with some quite interesting and slightly surprising insights there. Any questions? Andy?
I mean, I've got a load of questions, but does that mean
Just keep one question.
Because we're at the coffee break, should we just discuss it offline?
No, you can ask a question, but just one.
Okay. I mean, there's a lot of things that affect the development of traditional hurricanes, including, wind shear and the strength of the inversion layer. And the Mediterranean is known to having a pretty shallow boundary layer most of the time. I'm wondering if the buildup of sea surface temperature over a long period of time, over the summer, could actually reduce make it more susceptible to the deep convection required for something like an organized convection system like that. And the second thing is, SST is one thing, but the key issue really seems to be the heat content, which really means the actual depth of the seasonal thermocline. And and so when it comes to things like cooling, it's not really the loss of heat; it's the mixing up from below the thermocline that cools off the surface. So there's a whole bunch of things I just mentioned there, and I'm happy for you to discuss it offline.
No, yeah, but we are actually right now, because it was like urgent for us to say something, because everyone was saying that a positive anomaly was needed for that. So to say something about that. But right now we are looking into heat fluxes and other indicators that we can study in a more complex way what is happening right there. But I will be happy to talk about it.
Any final brief question for Claudia? Anything on mine? No?
No.
Okay, thank you very much to all our speakers, and thank you for keeping us well to time. We reconvene at 22.